They told me I should never talk about this. They said if I ever opened my mouth, what would be left of me would fit inside a classified folder with no name on it. But after decades of living with scars that don't show up on medical scans, after waking up night after night with the same sound echoing inside my head, I finally understood something. Silence is worse than any threat they could make. If you're hearing this now, you need to understand one thing first. What you think Area 51 isn't even close to the truth. Most people imagine experimental aircraft, secret weapons, maybe a few pieces of wreckage from something that fell out of the sky decades ago. That's exactly what I believed too. I was young, proud, convinced I had reached the peak of human engineering. I was wrong. My name doesn't matter anymore. What matters is what I saw. And what I saw was not meant for human eyes. It started with a transfer order. No explanation. No briefing. Just a black folder, completely unmarked, handed to me by an officer who didn't blink once while speaking. "You've been approved for immediate reassignment," he said. "Special access level, don't ask questions." So I didn't. The flight was silent. No conversations, no casual jokes. When we landed, there were no signs, no names, just desert. A vast, empty desert that felt chosen for one reason only. Because no one would hear anything scream out there. On the drive toward the facility, something felt off. It wasn't just the isolation. It felt like the place didn't want to be found. Roads seemed to repeat themselves. Landmarks disappeared. Distances made no sense. When we passed the final gate, the driver stopped and looked at me through the rearview mirror. "From here on," he said quietly, "there is no going back to normal." I laughed nervously. I thought it was just another military exaggeration. Then the doors opened. Area 51 from the outside is almost disappointing. Low concrete buildings, antennas, fences, nothing that justifies the legends. That's the lie. The real facility is underground. Elevators that descend for minutes. Levels that don't exist on any official map. Corridors where the air feels heavier, like it struggles to exist. That's when I realized something no one ever tells you about places like this. Fear doesn't come from one big, terrifying thing. It comes from small inconsistencies. Clocks drifting out of sync. Equipment failing only when certain doors open. People who avoid speaking, even when they're alone. My direct supervisor looked like a man who had aged too fast. Sunken eyes. A controlled, careful voice. He never gave his full name. "You'll be working in Sector 7, he said. Sector 7. Even now, that number makes my stomach tighten. He explained the rules mechanically, like someone who had repeated them hundreds of times. Never touch the objects directly. Never stay alone for extended periods. Document everything. And most importantly, do not trust what you think you're seeing." I assumed it was metaphorical. It was. When I passed the final security door and stepped into the lab, I felt something I had never felt before. Not fear. Recognition. As if something in that room knew I had arrived. In the center of the lab, placed on isolated platforms, were the objects. Not devices. Not prototypes. Objects. None had visible wires. No screws, no seams. The surfaces were too smooth, too perfect. And yet they felt alive. One was small enough to fit in the palm of my hand. Another was a heavy-looking cylinder, yet its weight readings constantly changed. And a third one. I avoided looking at it for too long. My supervisor noticed. "Not that one," he said. "You're not ready." At the time, I thought he meant the object. He meant me. The first days were technical. Measurements, passive observation, scanning. Then the inconsistencies began. Instruments returned contradictory data. Cameras captured patterns invisible to the naked eye. And sometimes, when I was alone in the lab, the objects reacted. Not violently, subtly. Temperature shifts without heat sources. Vibrations at frequencies I felt in my teeth, not my ears. And always that feeling that I was being evaluated. One night, I stayed late to finish reports. The lab became unnaturally quiet. No ventilation, no distant footsteps. When I looked up, I noticed the smallest object had changed. It hadn't moved, but it felt aware. You know that feeling when someone is staring at you before you see them. It was exactly like that. My heart started racing. Sensors began to alarm. And then everything went dark. Lights, monitors, clocks. In total darkness, something happened that still follows me. It wasn't a voice. It was a thought placed directly inside my mind. You can perceive us. I fell backward. I screamed. When the lights came back on, the lab looked normal. No data logs. No recorded anomaly. The official report read, temporary electrical failure. That night I didn't sleep. Neither did anyone else. As days passed, the staff began to change. Insomnia, sudden mood shifts, shared dreams. Everyone described the same place. A dark, formless space. Something watching, waiting. When one researcher requested an emergency transfer, his name vanished from the staff list. His desk was cleared without a word. When I asked about him, my supervisor said only, "Some people don't adapt." That's when the truth finally hit me. We weren't studying them. They were studying us. And we were failing. After the first incident, nothing was ever the same. Officially, it never happened. No alarms. No anomalies. No reason for concern. But once something shows you that it can reach inside your head, you don't just forget it. The lab felt different after that night. Not colder, not darker. Smaller, like the walls were listening. The supervisors tightened protocols almost immediately. No one was allowed to work alone anymore. Observation periods were shortened. Psychological evaluations became mandatory. They said it was routine. It was. They were scared. And fear inside a place like that spreads faster than any virus. The first real accident happened 12 days later. His name was Marcus Hale, 36 years old, brilliant materials engineer. The kind of guy who laughed too loud and talked too much, like he was trying to remind himself he was still human. Marcus had been assigned to Object C-17. C-17 was different from the others. Where most objects remained inert unless stimulated, C-17 reacted to presence. It didn't need power. It didn't need input. It responded to people. At first, the changes were subtle. Surface ripples, microscopic shifts in density, energy readings that didn't match any known scale. But then someone noticed something disturbing. C-17 behaved differently depending on who entered the room. With calm technicians, it stayed dormant. With anxious ones, it grew warmer. With Marcus, it reacted. Marcus was under stress. His mother was sick. He was sleeping maybe 3 hours a night. And C-17 knew it. During one session, the object began to vibrate violently. Not audibly. Internally. Marcus joked about it at first. said it felt like the thing was nervous. Then the gravity reading spiked. For 3 seconds, C-17 weighed nearly nothing. Then it weighed too much. The platform buckled. The containment field failed. Marcus didn't have time to scream. The object didn't explode, didn't burn, didn't strike him. It collapsed space around his torso. When we reached him, half his body was wrong. Compressed, twisted, as if reality itself had folded. He was still alive for 42 seconds. I counted. After that, they sealed the lab. No press releases. No incident reports that made sense. Marcus Hale officially died from catastrophic equipment failure. His family received a folded flag and a check. That night, I threw up until my throat bled. And I wasn't alone. That was when they introduced Level Black. No one talked about it openly. It didn't exist on schedules or blueprints. But suddenly, certain elevators required additional clearance. Certain doors appeared where there had been walls before. And certain people stopped coming back. My supervisor called me into his office 2 days later. He looked worse than usual. "You're being reassigned," he said. My stomach dropped. "To documentation review?" I asked. He hesitated. "No," he said. "Deeper." That was the first time I heard the phrase. Below Sector 7. The elevator ride felt longer than it should have been. No music. No indicator lights. Just the hum of machinery and the growing pressure in my ears. When the doors opened, I understood why no one talked about this level. The air was wrong. Not stale. Not toxic. Wrong. It smelled metallic, but also organic, like something alive had been sealed underground for too long. The walls weren't straight. They curved subtly, almost imperceptibly. Not built that way. Worn that way. This level wasn't about research. It was about containment. Cells lined the corridor. Not labs. Cells. Thick, transparent barriers, reinforced with materials I didn't recognize. Inside some of them, movement. I tried not to stare. The officer escorting me noticed. "Don't look too long," he said quietly. Some of them notice. We stopped at a reinforced door marked with a symbol instead of a number. I had never seen the symbol before. Something about it made my eyes ache. "This is where the recovered artifacts go once they stop pretending," he said. "Pretending to be what?" I asked. He didn't answer. Inside, the temperature dropped instantly. At the center of the room was an object larger than anything I had seen before. Roughly humanoid in shape, but wrong in proportion. No clear head. No limbs as we understand them. Its surface shifted constantly, like it couldn't decide what state of matter it preferred. "This one was found," the officer said, "not built." I felt my knees weaken. "Found where?" He swallowed. "Inside something else." That was when the object reacted. Not violently. Curiously. The surface stilled. And for the second time in my life, something spoke without using sound. "You are louder than the others." I staggered back. "What did it say?" the officer asked sharply. I hesitated. Training screamed at me to report everything. Instinct screamed louder. "Nothing," I lied. The object's surface rippled. It knew. After that, the dreams got worse. Not symbolic dreams. Not fragmented nonsense. Clear experiences. I was standing in a place with no sky. No ground. Just depth. Something vast moved beyond perception, like a shape too large for reality. And every time, right before I woke up, The same thought pressed into my mind. You are temporary. People started breaking. One technician locked himself in a bathroom and tried to drown himself in a sink. Another stopped speaking entirely, just stared at walls, eyes moving as if reading something invisible. Then came the memo. Mandatory psychological stabilization sessions. That was the lie. What it really meant was screening. They weren't asking who was traumatized. They were asking who was listening. Because some of us had started noticing patterns. The objects reacted more strongly to certain individuals. Some people drained them. Others energized them. And a very small number seemed to be recognized. One night during a closed-door briefing, a senior official finally said the words no one else would. "These are not machines," he said. "They are interfaces." Interfaces. Between what and what? That was when they showed us footage, recovered from a classified incident years earlier. A test chamber, a powered object, and a hole. Not a hole in the wall. A hole in here. Space bent inward, folding like fabric under pressure. And something looked through. Not entered. Looked. The footage cut out just as the screaming started. The room was silent when the lights came back on. The official cleared his throat. "These artifacts are not extraterrestrial," he said. "They are extra-dimensional. And they are not exploring us. They are preparing." That night, I realized something horrifying. Area 51 wasn't a research facility. It was a shoreline. And something on the other side was learning how to cross. Once they admitted what the objects really were, everything accelerated. Secrecy tightened. Access narrowed. Decisions were no longer debated, they were executed. Area 51 stopped being a place of discovery. It became a place of urgency. They divided us into categories: observers, handlers, and assets. I was reclassified as an asset. No explanation. Just a new badge and a new escort. That's when I was taken to the weapons chamber. They didn't call it that, of course. Officially, it was a response systems evaluation wing. But everyone down there knew the truth. If the interfaces decided to stop watching and start acting, this was humanity's last line of defense. The object waited in the center of the room. Sleek, curved, almost elegant. It looked vaguely like a rifle, but without a barrel. No trigger, no power source, just a shape that felt intentional. "This one's different," the lead engineer said. "It doesn't respond to proximity or emotion." I already knew that was a lie. It responded to thought. When I stood near it, my skin prickled. Not with fear, with familiarity. They asked me to hold it. Protocol demanded protective gloves, shielding, biometric monitoring. None of it mattered. The moment my hands closed around the object, it adjusted. Not mechanically, biologically. The surface softened, reshaped itself to my grip, like it had been waiting for hands shaped like mine. Every monitor in the room spiked. Heart rate stable. Someone said, "Neural activity is elevated but coherent." What they didn't say out loud was the most important part. The weapon wasn't drawing power from the facility. It was drawing it from me. They positioned a reinforced composite wall at the far end of the chamber, designed to withstand missile impacts. "Just think about activation," the director said. "Don't imagine destruction, just intent." That should have terrified me. Instead, a thought slid into place with terrifying ease. Not fire. Not attack. Erase. There was no sound. No flash. No recoil. A perfect circular section of the wall ceased to exist. Not broken. Not melted. Gone. Sensors showed no heat signature. No radiation. No debris. Reality itself had been edited. The room was silent. Then alarms began screaming. The weapon slipped from my hands and hit the floor. It didn't deactivate. It went dormant. Satisfied. That test never appeared in any report. The chamber was sealed permanently, and the people who authorized it were reassigned to places no one ever heard from again. That was the moment they realized the worst possible truth. The objects weren't tools. They were permissions. They didn't generate power. They didn't follow commands. They allowed access to something vast, something patient, something that understood us better than we understood ourselves. And then came the event. They call it a containment anomaly. I call it the day the facility screamed. It started with tremors, not seismic, dimensional. Walls warped, corridors stretched, doors opened into places they shouldn't. People got lost walking straight lines. Security feeds showed figures standing where no one should be, motionless, watching. Not intruders, observers. The interfaces activated across multiple levels simultaneously. Not reacting, responding. Something had changed on the other side. They weren't just studying anymore. They were ready. In the deepest level, the one never acknowledged the barrier failed. Not catastrophically, deliberately. A breach opened just wide enough to prove a point. No creature emerged. No invasion force. Just pressure, presence. Every person in the facility felt it. An intelligence brushing against ours like a hand against glass. And the message arrived. Not in words, in understanding. You have served your purpose. Panic broke containment faster than any anomaly. Evacuation orders conflicted. Systems contradicted themselves. Some doors refused to open. Others opened too wide. I saw people step through thresholds and simply not arrive anywhere else. The interfaces weren't malfunctioning. They were sorting, selecting. I was pulled into a secure chamber with a handful of others. The director stood shaking, his authority gone. "We can't stop this," he said. "We were never meant to." That's when I understood why some people were never allowed to leave Area 51. Not because they knew too much, but because they were compatible, useful, recognized. I was scheduled for permanent reassignment. Below the lowest level. I ran. I shouldn't have made it out. The facility rearranged itself as I moved, like a maze that didn't want to escape. But something else intervened. One of the interfaces, the first one I ever worked with, activated as I passed. And for the last time it spoke. "You are not required yet." Doors unlocked. Systems ignored me. I reached the surface as dawn broke over the desert. By the time the sun rose fully, the anomaly was sealed. Officially, Area 51 continues to operate. Planes still fly. Lights still glow at night. But the work has changed. They don't experiment anymore. They maintain. They monitor. They wait. Because the interfaces are still active. Dormant. Learning. And whatever is on the other side now understands something terrifying about us. We are curious. We are ambitious. And we always open the door again. If this recording ever disappears, if I disappear, remember this. We were never alone. And we were never in control. The shoreline is still there, and something beyond it is very patient.